Layoffs, redundancies, firing people. And of course, that's not the most popular topic. However, especially after recent events and due to the amount of emails I received about this topic, this is what we're going to talk about today. We had quite a number of actual cases right now, and you saw that even big names in big industries and significant and very influential industries are now, right now, at the moment, downsizing. And I'm not only talking about the tech sector. So when we look into what's happening right now, McKinsey laying off 2,000 people. I have no idea why someone told them they are right-sizing the company. Whoever used that word, sorry, that is just too much consultancy bingo. So just don't use these words. Right-sizing businesses. When you lay off people, tell them these are redundancies because that's what they are. So McKinsey lays off 2,000 people. Accenture announces even 20,000, to be precise, 19,000 people being laid off. That's 2.5% of all staff. And they say that IT spending slowed down, and that's why they decided to work with less staff in the future. The question is there a chain effect? Is there a chain effect? And how can you justify when you need to, I don't want to say get rid of people, but when you say you have a certain amount of redundancies where you decided that we probably should not work with all of the team in the future. And of course, how do you deal with that internally and externally? What are the effects? What do you have to take care of? What are the steps you have to take? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So let's look into how to do it properly. And of course, one thing is crystal clear: firing people, redundancies, layoffs sometimes need to happen. When you think as an entrepreneur, no matter if you're self-employed or if you're a manager or an executive or any kind of leader, if you sit here listening to this podcast and think, I could not remotely think of ever laying someone off. I could never, ever think of that, even not after coaching or training or whatever else as a measure which I could visit or take or use, or the tools I get. No, I could not tell people you have no job by next week, next month, or next year. And by the way, if you say you generally exclude that from your skill set, please do not go to any leadership position, because laying people off is part of leadership work. Of course, not the most popular one, not the one you want to do, but it is part of what you have to do in certain situations. So are there certain aspects which you could look into why people probably should not spend more time in your organization? Yes, we're going to look into three main aspects first. So we have IQ, EQ, CQ. So IQ is not only about the intelligence quotient, it's not only about being smart or having a certain degree. Sometimes people don't have the skill. So I could theoretically probably learn how to be an electrician on paper. However, no matter how hard I try, and I give you the exaggerated number, there's a 0% chance that I will ever be able to do anything DIY related or work with your hands and put it in the wall related without significantly damaging the business, the building, myself, or all of the above. So when you see people who probably have the skills in theory, but not in practice, you see that they try the hardest, but no matter how much you offered help and all the measures you offered are basically, you're running out of measures now. When you see they don't have the skills, you have to tell them, sorry, goodbye. However, very important is the lack of their skills has to be within their means. So, for example, when someone is very skillful, but suddenly they have an accident, then of course you need to offer different approaches, except and not just lay them off, because that would be very antisocial. I'm always talking about people who, within their means, could learn something, but either they are unwilling or they are unable to do so, and then you have to decide, sorry. We decided to give you a thank you, no thank you about your future employment. Of course, you put it in different words. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And the EQ, the second one, is the emotional quotient. Let's say you have a colleague and someone asks you, so how is this new colleague doing? And then someone says, oh, skill-wise, they are excellent. You already know how this phrase continues. People will say, oh, very good at their job. However, personally, it's a bit of a challenge. That's what Brits probably would say. Germans would say horrible person. So a bit more straightforward here. If someone fits in well with their skills, but they do not fit in with their personality, there is no chance they can sustain in your organization. Always be aware of that. So when people do not fit in personally, they might significantly put into danger your team, maybe the whole department, maybe the whole organization if it gets to the worst point. Be sure that the emotional quotient is also fit. And the third one is the CQ, the cultural quotient. Do people fit into your culture of work, your organizational culture, how you deal with aspects right now? I'm right now doing my MBA on the side besides working full time. And I, at the moment, write a paper about cultural intelligence and also organizational culture. So I could probably talk about that alone for an hour and a half right now, but that's not the point here. When the culture is not a fit, then it's not a fit for the person's future. I give you a very simple example. With one of the customers I work with, one of my clients, they hired someone, and it's a remote first company. The person came straight from university, was very keen to work remotely, was looking for a remote first company and said, this is it, perfect, here we go. After 4 months, they decided to go their own ways. And that's, of course, nearly the worst case scenario. When you have someone, you put all the effort in, and then you have to tell them, sorry, this is not a fit. We have to let you go, or we fire you, or whatever you want to tell them. And there was a very simple reason. The person realized that remote work is great. However, they were missing people in the office. They wanted to go to the office. They wanted to meet people there. So probably someone who's not keen or not a good fit for a remote first company, but for a hybrid company. And of course, they talked and they addressed the issue. However, the person very clearly said 2 or 3 times a week, I would like to travel somewhere and meet people in the office. Is this possible? And the answer was a very clear no, because it is a remote first company and the people they hired are remote first people. So when you do not fit into the organizational culture, that is the point where you have to say goodbye, or the organization has to say goodbye. So we have these 3 factors: IQ, the skills; EQ, the emotional aspect, the how to work together; the soft skill aspect, leadership aspect, etc., interpersonal skills; and the CQ, the cultural quotient, everything concerning your organizational culture. However, this is not the full list. You know that sometimes there's a simple reason why you lay people off, and the reason is the numbers do not add up. Economical reasons. So what you have to do here is step number 1, give full transparency, and I mean full disclosure. If you don't, by the way, it is just a matter of time until people will call you out. Numbers today, especially from larger organizations, are publicly available. And as soon as people see you're doing well, but you still lay off people for no reason and with no transparency and no reasoning, you will get a very bad reputation very quickly. The second aspect here is, because sometimes people say, well, there are some mass aspects or mass effects where we can take advantage of. So, for example, when every single tech company now is laying off, we can just lay off as well and say, this is how it is. Even if we don't need to lay off, we just like to raise the profit. So can't we use that? You could. There's no question about that. There's a higher likelihood that people will accept that you're laying off your employees, but other people or other organizations do so as well. They probably will question less, and you will face less backlash because people think this is just how it is right now. However, you cannot complain when exactly the same mass effect is turned against you, because we have certain mass effect. Let's just say people sit in front of you and say, look, I actually plan to leave, but you can pay me more to stay because, we have high inflation. Please pay me more. Or, hey, we have scarcity of talent. Please pay me more. Or, hey, the market is really tight at the moment. You see anyone is texting me on LinkedIn, so please pay me more. So you see the same mass effects you use can easily be turned against you. So be aware when you use them, be prepared that they are used against you. And that is going to be an expensive game, which is why I recommend not to use mass effects. Always be fully transparent. Always use full disclosure. The third aspect then is how to put it into place. If you are fully transparent, there is no mass effect. You say it is as it is, and we have to let people go, or we have to announce certain redundancies. Always distinguish between 2 major. So of course, you need a fully disclosed plan how this is going to be done. What are the different steps, the timelines, the deadlines, etc., etc. As soon as you are not transparent with that, and you have a gap in your communication, no worries. Someone else will fill it with probably their made-up opinion, and then they will turn against you with that opinion with likelihood of slightly higher than 95%. So be sure that you communicate clearly how will the redundancies happen. And then always distinguish between responsibility and accountability. Responsibility means who does what. Who's going to do which exit interview? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do the writing? Who's going to fill in all the paperwork? Blah, 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 blah. That's responsibility. Accountability are the people who have to justify the final result in the end. And these are leaders, managers, or executives. Unfortunately, quite often these people disappear, and they often have the same line in common. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There are 5 different aspects you have to look at right now when you are the accountable person. So first, what is the effect you have inside the organization? How will people react? How are they going to talk? Because one thing is crystal clear. The worst employees stay till the end. The best employees leave first. So you probably have to talk to a lot of people to keep them inside the organization. Aspect number two, what is the effect outside the organization? You do not want to be the organization where people say, well, I'm not going to apply with you because you're laying me off anyway in 2 years. You're always laying off after a couple of years. Thank you. No, thank you. So what is the effect outside of the market there? That is something you need to know in advance. And how do you want to encounter when certain backlash moments happen? Aspect number 3 is PR, public communication. Do you have a comms, as some people say, comms department, communications department? How is this accompanying the measures you put in place right now? And by the way, you need to be proactive on what can happen, not reactive. Don't sit there and say, what could go wrong if we fire someone? We don't know. Let's just wait. This is not how it works. So PR, public communication, public relation, anything in that department has to be thoroughly planned. I highly recommend Alan Stevens here, has an amazing newsletter. When you go to mediacoach.co.uk, just sign up there. Every single week, you get free communications tips from someone who's in the industry for decades, is still frequently on Sky News, the BBC, etc., etc. Aspect number 4, look at what is going to be your reputation online and offline. Offline is in the business network. So you have to, I don't want to say infiltrate, but influence these business networks by sending your managers to public events, talking about what you really do and why you do it and how it is hopefully something positive in the mid or long run. And then the reputation online. In Germany, it's Kununu. In the English-speaking world, it's glassdoor.com. Manage these entries there well. Give reasonable reactions. Talk to people because that often de-escalates the conflict significantly. And aspect number 5, always look at where do you see reasonable and where do you see unreasonable behavior? Because often people think unreasonable behavior is an exclusive behavior from leaders. No, it is not. You have employees who misbehave significantly, especially when they suddenly see that they don't have the skills they think they have. They aren't as crucially important as they think. And suddenly someone found out, and that's why you have to go. However, unreasonable behavior from leaders is always more present in the perception of the general public and anyone looking into your industry. They will always focus more on leaders. As soon as an employee gets laid off or fired, made redundant, and they act in a very unreasonable way, people will always say, that's an emotional moment we can all relate to. Tick the box, that was it. As soon as a senior leader from your organization acts the wrong way, people will say the following. They will say, look at that organization, they are laying off people and their managers are still misbehaving from start to finish, from left to right, from soup to nuts. And that's where you have to say, stop and train your people properly. Very important is that leaders have to position themselves proactively and be an active part of the game of participation. You have to participate actively in this process of redundancy because often leaders suddenly disappear. And why? Because they have the same line in common. And I told you there is this very peculiar line, very particular line. What is the line? They say, oh, redundancies? Oh, that's bad. Well, it's a job for HR, isn't it? Bye. See you next year. No, it's not. Leaders have to position themselves proactively. What is your job here? What do you do here? How do you influence the result? How do you justify the result? And you must actively participate in what you are doing right there, because there is one very important line. In the moment of crisis, you see the character's truth. Anyone shows in a crisis how they really are. And as soon as you realize that, oh, that is the person I worked for. Okay, I think the public should know. As soon as redundancies, layoffs, anything where people get fired, lose their job for whatever reason happen, the main question is, where do you stand on the matter? Your call. And of course, I published about this. So first, I have to say thank you again. We again had amazing rankings. You probably saw it on Instagram or LinkedIn, and published it on social media again and again the last week. We seem to be on a streak. I am obviously impressed by this. Thank you very much. If you now think, well, I like to talk about a couple of things, let's go. Send me an email, nb@nb-networks.com, and then we take it from there. If you have something very specific, where you say, hey, we need someone for a workshop, a training, a coaching, or a speaking gig. Could you speak at our conference? Yeah, I can. Yeah, just drop me an email in as well. But we can also just talk about your points, nb@nb-networks.com. And one thing I also recommend, step number 2, is register for the leadership letter, expert.nb-networks.com. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, you only receive 1 email per week on a Wednesday morning. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee, and anything you see in there is free of charge. You can access it, but only via the resource I just gave you, only via that channel. When you go to expert.nb-networks.com, when you go there, you can access anything you like for free. And the third step, and that's the most important one, is the one that brings your organization forward. Apply, and for a change, apply what you heard in this podcast, because only when you apply what you've heard, you will see the positive change that you're all looking for in your organization. I'm always here to help. Let me know and drop me a line, and then we take it from there. Otherwise, at the end of this podcast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.